Good morning. This is Andrew Parrish. Just wanted to let you know we'll get started in just a couple of minutes here. All right, I'm just going to give it one more minute because we have a lot of people joining right now. We'll get started here in just a moment. Okay, I think we're going to get going here. Just want to, I guess, double check and make sure that everyone can see the first slide before I get going.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, welcome. I am Andrew Parrish, and I will be doing a walkthrough of our new reporting tools that we've developed. We also have other CalRecycle staff here to answer questions. And then so CalRecycle staff, as I call your names, if you could please turn on your cameras just so everyone can see your faces, and then I'll have you turn your cameras off as we get the presentation started. So we have Alan Illusorio here, Alexis Arens, Ashley Yee from our enforcement branch, Kara Morgan from our local assistance and market development branch, Daniel Osborne for edible food, Jill Furch. We have Cameron Zargar, Marcus Santillano, I think I just butchered your name, sorry about that, Martin Perez, and Ray Carranza. All right, thank you so much. You can turn your cameras off and I'll get the walkthrough started and kind of tell you the general format of this presentation today. And I'm also going to turn my camera off so you can see more of the slides. Okay. So we're here today to talk about SB 1383 jurisdiction reporting tools. The first one we'll go through is the restructured EAR jurisdiction tool. So this is going to give you how the SB 1383 reporting questions are built into the EAR. And then the walkthrough is going to be an Excel spreadsheet for demonstration purposes because our logic system is not quite ready to show you, but we will be showing that to you as soon as it is ready. And I'll talk about that a little bit more once I actually get that up. And then we'll also be presenting the April 2022 SB 1383 initial jurisdiction report tool, which is a Word document that has all the required reporting questions for 1383. And this one will be a Word document submittal as an option that we're providing because our logic system will not quite be ready to accept that report. And I'll get to that in just a moment in greater detail. Okay, so just to kind of go over our instructions for our Q&A session, the general format, I'm going to do a walkthrough and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of that to answer all your questions about the first tool. Then we'll present the next tool and have another Q&A session, and then there should be time at some end to ask any additional follow-up questions too if we didn't get to it in one of the other Q&A sessions. So if you're using GoToWebinar, type your question or a summary of your question into the question pane. Questions should focus on the restructured EAR or April 2022 reporting tools. CalRecycle staff will go through the questions on a first come, first served basis. To ask your question, you must unmute yourself first on your end and please state your affiliation. If we are unable to answer your question during the webinar, CalRecycle staff will follow up with you. We will not be using the raise hand function. And if you're watching via the Cal EPA broadcast, you can email your questions to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. All right, now we're going to switch over and show you what the new EAR is going to look like, which actually I do not have open yet. So give me just one moment while I grab that real fast. Sorry about that. Thought I had that open already. Sorry, bear with me for just one moment. Oh, where is it? There it is. Okay, I apologize for that. I thought I had that one open. I did not. Okay, so to begin, I just want to talk a little bit about what you're looking at in the format before we actually get into the rebuild. You are looking at an Excel document. The restructured EAR will not be in an Excel document. It will be in the logic system that most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, but just for demonstration purposes, and we just wanted to inform all stakeholders as early as possible what the new EAR will look like, and this was our best way to do that at the moment. So in general, kind of what you're looking at, and I just want to double check to make sure this Excel spreadsheet is showing real quick before I keep going, if someone could verify that for me.
You're good.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so in general, what you're looking at over on the left side of the Excel spreadsheet will be examples of what the current and old EAR, once the new one gets launched, looks like. And on the left will be the new structure. And so on this first screen here, what you're looking at is in the red boxes, both the list and then the tabs across the top will have the sections over on the left side. The colors don't have any significance. We just organized them in that way to kind of group things together just to help break up the year as you're going through filling it out for reporting if you choose to use this option. Any of the yellow highlighted areas that you're going to see as I walk through this are just for informational purposes. They won't be in the build, and the intention there is just to provide a little bit more explanation about what you're looking at. And then the tabs across the bottom also mirror the list on the left-hand side of your screen. Okay. And then as we get into the section structure, we're implementing, I'm going to call it a grid, but I think most of you are familiar with the term table. But we have this grid structure, and kind of what I mean by the grids here would be these here. So anytime I say grid, that's kind of what I'm referring to on the screen. We're just starting off with procurement here for no particular reason. So the year is kind of taking, one of the major shifts that it's taking is it's going from being organized by law that it's reported on, so whether that be AB 939 or MCR or more or SB 1383, the year is going to be reorganized into a program area or a sector and material type. And this just allows for a little bit more flexibility, and I think most of you will find it a little more user-friendly with that organization as well. So in general, just to kind of explain the build a little bit more, within each grid, you'll see in this current example that there's jurisdictions 1 through 6. As I walk through this, the example I'm providing to you was built with the intention of regional agencies. So if you are just a single jurisdiction, you will just have kind of one row in all these grids I'm highlighting in that red box. Each grid will be pre-populated with your jurisdiction name or members of your regional agency. So it's not something you'll have to fill in anymore for the regional agency users. Most of the grids have titles on them. There'll be tooltips, kind of like these, which are those question marks that you're probably familiar with, next to the things which will provide more information, like I'm kind of showing with my cursor here, to tell you exactly what we're asking for, potentially where the regulatory section for 1383 that we're citing, or just to further explain exactly what we're looking for in those areas. The boxes, as you see here, that I'm kind of highlighting, I'll draw a box around them, will be checkboxes within the electronic annual report. And you can just check and uncheck those material types. Okay, so now I'm going to just talk about the procurement tab specifically here, procurement section specifically. So this first grid that you're looking at, the procurement target will be pre-populated, which I believe CalRecycle already shared with all of you based on your population. So that'll be your procurement target. The annual procurement will be calculated based on the inputs in the recovered organic waste product procurement grid below. And then the adjusted procurement target will be calculated based on the inputs in the adjusted recovered organic waste product procurement grid below. These checkbox sections that we pulled out, you'll see a very common theme as we walk through these sections. What we did here was, you'll see the note that some of these product types are from your SHRE program code 1030 SRPMT, and then some of them are 1383 procurement tools. And what we did is just tried to pull any of those program details out that were previously buried within your SHRE programs in your old year, and just bring them out front so they're a little bit easier to access for you, and you don't have to go in necessarily to the program details to get to them. And then I'll talk about a little bit more about what you're probably used to with adjusting those program details at the bottom of this section here. All right, as we walk into the first grid, another column that you're probably seeing is this rural exemption column, and it won't look exactly like this in the year, but what we did was we built in a structure of whether you had a rural exemption, a low population waiver, a high elevation waiver, or Article 17. From here on out, I'm probably going to refer to all of those collectively as just kind of waivers for simplicity of the conversation. But the way this area will function is if you have submitted a waiver and exemption form to the department, that'll be associated with your jurisdiction. So you'll have these check boxes options available in the grids if they apply to you. They won't be present if you do not have one of these waiver types or the Article 17 as part of your program. But in general, what it does, I guess just to further explain the grid, any asterisk you see is a required field within the electronic annual report. And what these checkboxes do is if a rural exemption applies to you or one of the other waiver types, you check it and then it would no longer make the entries for that particular row a required field just so you could progress through the electronic annual report. And this is partly just kind of due to the limitations of our logic system, but as well as kind of the complexity that each individual jurisdiction could have based on waivers, especially with regional agencies. Just kind of the best way we found to address that, to allow some self-reporting of that so that we can verify that you don't have to report those things, and keeping it flexible if things change in the future. Okay, so I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but just I'm going to stick with the regional agency example because I think that applies for most, but just keep in mind if you're a single jurisdiction, you only have one row in all these grids. So you'll come in and enter the information as it applies to you for what you've procured, for either renewable gas in the form of transportation fuel, electricity from renewable gas used for heating applications, electricity from biomass conversion, our compost. The checkboxes you see here will allow you, and it's going to look slightly different in the ear, but there'll be a functionality that you can select either tons or cubic yards depending on how you're measuring that. And then the mulch in tons. One feature in each of the grids, we have this additional description column, and you'll see that it doesn't have any asterisks in it, so this will not be a required field. But we wanted to allow a little bit of flexibility for the jurisdictions that if they wanted to provide an extra explanation about anything, this would be the area of where you'll be able to do that. And then just to kind of here over on the highlighted note, the values in here are converted into a common unit and populate your annual procurement in the table above. The calculation factors we use are in section 18993(1)G in the 1383 regulations. Now, I'm being told you can't see my red outlines. That's unfortunate. Okay, I would just highlight columns from here on out. So just to kind of show you here, this grid here, as you enter this information in on a per jurisdiction basis, will pop up with its associated jurisdiction in one of these rows up here for this column here. All right, and then moving on, and then as we progress through these, we'll move a little bit faster. I just wanted to give a good overview of the build in general, just so you had an understanding, because you'll see a very common theme as we move through each section. Same idea here. In this grid, you'll have an option to select a rural exemption, and that just makes it so that a particular row would no longer be a required field. Because of some of the limitations of our logic system, we have to have kind of a yes/no response just so the system knows that you've answered that question. So that's why you'll see this format here. So if it doesn't apply, you just click no, and then you wouldn't be required to input anything else over here. And then in general, in each section, for your particular jurisdiction, because as I walk through this, you're going to see all the available SHRI programs, but for your particular jurisdiction, the only SHRI programs that will populate in each of these sections are the ones that you've always had. There's no SHRI programs have been added, and you'll see it more in the commercial and residential sections that the entire list is there. So just keep in mind that for your individual jurisdiction, only the programs that you selected in your SHRI or your HHWE, your household hazardous waste element, or your source reduction recycling element will be what populates down here. And one of the changes that we're doing, if you're familiar with it, and I don't have a section, but I think it makes sense for you, most of you, there will no longer be kind of the easy button to check to satisfy the fields of this, but the way these areas will function is there'll be a checkbox over on the side of the program. And so if none of the program details, which is kind of an example here over on the right side of the screen, need to be updated, you can check the box. And that's just verifying that that SHRI program is still, that the program details of that SHRI program are still current and up to date. If you do want to come into this old format and adjust anything in here, as soon as you check the box, there'll be a hyperlink on the program, on the program name, and you'll be able to click on that and go into these program details. The notes box that you're seeing here is the same note box that is over on the right side of the screen and kind of the example. And so if you want to describe anything further about the SHRI program specifically, you'll be able to write in either note field. Whichever note field you write in, it doesn't matter. They're saved in the same area. It's always saved in these program details here. Okay. Edible food is pretty straightforward since this is all SB 1383. Again, it'll just be per jurisdiction if you're in a regional agency. Anywhere you see an asterisk will be a required field. And then there'll be an additional description box if you want to say anything further. One thing I did forget to say, we'll also have kind of an auto sum feature at the bottom of these grids. So it'll total everything up for you at the bottom. Okay. The collection container system. This one will take me a minute to walk through. There's some functionality here that we wanted to make it as user-friendly as possible. And it won't look exactly like this. This is one section that will look a little bit different than how it's being displayed here, but the process is going to work very similarly. So for each jurisdiction, again, those will be pre-populated in here. We wanted to allow flexibility that if you had different collection systems for commercial or residential or per jurisdiction to allow you to do so. And then again, you'll see kind of these waiver types in here. So what these will do is one of these applies, you can check it, and then there won't be a requirement to fill it out as it applies to those particular waivers or exemptions. The way it'll work is per jurisdiction, you'll kind of come in. We're splitting between commercial and residential just in the case that you may have a different collection system between the two. But you'll check the box for whichever container system applies, 3+, 3 container, 2, 1, or other, just to give you some flexibility there. And then the 1383 kind of requirement would be to enter a number of generators that have that collection system type. And then at the end of it, we'll have additional description if you want to provide any additional information there. I'm sure each jurisdiction, it'll look a little bit different than this, but essentially there'll be kind of a prompt for you to add haulers as needed. You'll be able to add as many haulers per jurisdiction as needed. There'll be a space to fill in the hauler name. Again, it's not required that you fill in the hauler name, but if hauler A, hauler B, just to keep it more organized for yourself, and be an area to do that. And then so on a per hauler basis, you'll be able to do the same thing as well. Let's kind of just check the boxes and enter the number of generators that that collection system applies to. Okay. All right, next we have the allowed materials and green container and collection facilities questions. Again, we'll have the waiver section as it applies that you've applied to the jurisdiction, so you won't see this part unless one of these applies to you in particular. And again, based on kind of limitations of our logic system, we have to have kind of a yes/no system here, just so the system knows that you've satisfied that reporting requirement. In both of these and those little pop-ups you see will be kind of those tooltips that I talked about earlier. So you don't need to see those at the moment. They'll make a lot more sense as we show you the actual build of this. So in these two sections, you'll see the wording, identify the facility that provided notice that accepts and recovers compostable plastic, or select applicable RDRS facility number. So within these sections, it's not required that you select the RDRS facility number, but we'll have some functionality here from, I don't know if it's exactly a version of a drop-down list that you can identify them with the RDRS number if you so choose, or you can describe them how you would like to there. And then an additional description you'll see is not required, but you can provide more information if you want to here. Same format for the organics allowed in the placed in plastic bags question, kind of answer yes, no, and then identify the facility. And then each table, wherever numbers apply, has kind of an auto sum feature down at the bottom. All right, organic waste haulers. This is for those approved or revoked. And then in this column here, you'll see the wording slightly differently. So for the haulers approved or revoked, it does require that the RDRS facility number is input to identify where the high diversion organic waste processing facility that's receiving the organic waste from those approved haulers. And so in this particular column, you will only have the option to put in the RDRS numbers, whereas up here, you can identify them other ways. And there'll be kind of a text box where you can type in how you'd like to identify them. And you can also, in any of those three areas where RDRS numbers is an option or required, you'll be able to enter as many RDRS numbers as you like, or select them. All right, as we get into our commercial programs, this is where I kind of pulled out a lot of those program details from the SHRE program. So hopefully all of this looks familiar to you. And I was hoping my little draw tool would be able to work, but I'll just have to use my words on it here. So a couple of changes. I mean, just to note, first of all, the program details you're looking at under the organic section is being pulled from program code 3035 CM, which is your commercial organics collection. You see the notes here that will remove the collection type and remove other organic material management. So there'll only be material types to select here, and it'll be a checkbox system. We are going to add additional organics materials that will match our SB 1383 organics capacity calculator material type list. And then as we get into the commercial and residential programs, the general format will be organics first, then recycling, and then SHRE programs is the general build of all these sections. So recycling, again, this is for commercial specifically. This information should hopefully look familiar to you. It's the same material list that's in program code 2030 RC OSP. The collection type and collection targets will be removed here, so those won't be required questions to answer. And again, you'll just kind of go through and check the boxes as they apply to your jurisdictions of the materials you're capturing. So if you remember before, this is kind of the area where all of the SHRE program codes are showing up. So if any of these look unfamiliar to you, just keep in mind that only the ones you've selected for your jurisdiction will populate in this area. These sections all work the same as I previously explained in the procurement area. You have a checkbox to say that the program details are correct and current and do not need to be adjusted. There'll be a hyperlink under the name itself if you need to get to these program details. Within the EAR itself, you'll have a notes field if you'd like to provide additional explanation. It's the same notes field that's in the program details itself. Just to kind of give you, and then as we get down, and a lot of the EAR rebuild was moving some parts around. So this large venues section, there's no changes to it. It just now lives under the commercial programs section. It'll operate the same as it always has down here. All right, so because of 1383 in particular, it caused a lot of overlap in reporting requirements. And we tried to make that as simple as possible while still maintaining regulatory requirements of each individual law. Here's one of the first examples of where we've combined those things. So you'll see in kind of row 3 that it's listing all applicable laws, the SLCP, which should be 1383, MCR, MORE, and SHRI and WE programs are 939. And what we've done here, it'll still be on a per jurisdiction basis that you have to answer the questions. If waivers apply for 1383, you'll be able to check that to not do the requirement of entering the numbers that 1383 requires for the generators that you've given that education outreach material to. It still will be required because of 939 MCR and or more to select the what education outreach methods you are doing. So whether that be print, electronic, direct contact, or other. You'll see in this particular grid that the kind of extra additional description is worded slightly different, and here it is required that you describe the education and outreach. And that's the same as you've always done. So if it's print, if you're giving out trifolds or doing mailers, electronic, text message, web, stuff like that, direct contact, going out in the field and talking to people, or any other education outreach materials you're doing. And I guess just to reiterate it one more time, so you'll no longer have to kind of answer what you're doing for each individual law, whether it be MCR, MORE, 939, or 1383 separately. It's all put into this one section here. So this will satisfy all of those kind of reporting requirements. The 1383 specific piece is the number of generators. And again, if one of these waiver types applies to you, it won't make that number required if it applies. And then I guess just to preface it, because I don't think I said it earlier, this is kind of an early template of what we're doing, and so it won't be exactly like the EAR, just because of some of the limitations of the system, but this will give a very good representation, and this Excel spreadsheet, and later where we can show you where you can kind of get a copy of this Excel spreadsheet, will match the EAR pretty closely. I think will be a beneficial tool for when it does come time to report within the EAR if you choose that option. Commercial edible food generators section. Same idea as above. It is 1383 specific, but you select the material type of how you're educating your generators, enter the number as it applies, and then describe those materials that you're doing. And then for the SHRI specific part, since 939 still does require kind of acknowledgement of these programs is still applying, we still have to have the to verify that the program details are all correct for these, and they'll be generally organized into these different groupings, but it functions the same. You check the box, you click on the hyperlink if you want to make any notes in particular for these SHRI programs that were not captured already up in this grid above. And so you have to go through and check these boxes to make sure they apply, or if they don't, because you do have the option to kind of drop them if that's something that occurs through the course of the year. Okay. Again, anytime we had some kind of buried checkable boxes for you within the SHRI programs, we try to just pull them out into the EAR up front just for easier access. So this is an example of that of 4060 SP, your concrete asphalt rubble, if that applies to you. This section was buried in the program details. We're just pulling it out front for easier access. CalGreen has the same build, enter the number of construction and demolition removal activities conducted in compliance with CalGreen. Additional description if you want to explain anything further. Here we made a slight changes to the SRI structure because it just made a little more sense to move this particular program code up with the CalGreen section instead of putting it all the way at the bottom of the page, but it functions the same way. We just put that there for easier access. And WELO, enter the number of projects subject to the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. Additional description field if you want to provide more information. We'll have an ordinance section with checkboxes. We're going to add a few and remove a few. And this was buried within 6020, your ordinance SRI program code. And again, pulling it out front for easier access, and then also moving that particular SRI program up with it for to make it more user-friendly. This particular section is also kind of the catch-all for anything that's not necessarily commercial or necessarily residential or hazardous waste. You'll see kind of this blue area, but as I've been describing this section and all the previous sections, it'll work the same way. You'll have a notes field in each section, be able to get to the program details as it shows on the right for any of these programs that may apply for you. Hazardous waste programs is SRI only, so that's all you'll see here. Same idea, check the boxes, get to the program details if you need to make any changes there. Residential programs is built the same way as commercial. The program codes specifically would be 3000 CMRCG for the organics. The collection targets will be removed from this section, only be material types. It'll match the same as commercial did. The SB 1383 organics capacity calculator material types there. For recycling, this is program code 2000. We're going to remove the collection targets and collection type here, so it'll only be the materials that you're selecting here. And then down at the bottom of the page, your SRI residential programs, check the box that the program details are accurate. Click on the hyperlink if you need to make any changes. The disposal section, so you'll see over on the right is kind of the old build, and the red box, hopefully that red box shows up, I think it should, is just showing you the sections that are moving here. There's no changes here. It's just moving it all into one section so that it's all grouped together. So it'll be the disposal rate calculation. The calculation factors will actually be on a different section, but it'll be very clear once it's in the ear just because of limitations of our system. And then the disposal rate accuracy question. All right, waivers and exemptions. Have the department issues waivers. So that'd be the number of generators waived from the requirement to subscribe to organic waste collection service. As an example, with like a rural exemption, you'd enter that number there. If you had any equipment failures or any disaster and emergency waivers, this is where you'd enter that information here. And you can provide additional information if you want to. Jurisdiction issued waivers for 1383, you'd enter in this grid here for physical space or de minimis. And then more exemptions where 1383 doesn't override it, and this is again kind of based on limitations of our system. We couldn't customize it for each individual jurisdiction, so we have to have kind of the more exemptions if that applies for your particular jurisdiction. There will be a tooltip kind of explaining the difference between the two of these here to further explain kind of the difference of what we're asking between kind of I think the physical space and de minimis are the biggest examples. Over here on the right, so the mandatory commercial organics recycling section, as you're used to with these tabs here, that's going away because it's all been built into these grids that I've been showing you, and the grids the other two tabs of grids I'm going to show you. And in particular, the enforcement and self-haul reporting for more, even though they're optional here, these questions just won't exist in the program details anymore. We're just going to remove those so there's no confusion about or anything that you have to require to kind of move through the report. Prohibited container contaminants, whatever system you may select, whether that be route reviews or the waste evaluations, you'll check the box. We have these split to just try to highlight the difference between column G here and column J. that this is the number of route reviews conducted for prohibited container contaminants associated with route reviews in particular, whereas this one over here, and that's why the word targeted is bolded and underlined, is associated with the the route reviews that occurred based on the waste evaluation. And then again, we'll have tooltips here to explain that difference, but how it works is you check the box, enter the number of route reviews, and then for either system, enter the number of violations, target education materials that were issued, number of notices, violations, or target education materials issued to the generators. If you do waste evaluations, you check that box, type the description here, that'll be a text box, the targeted route reviews, and then again, enter the number of notices, violations, or target education materials issued to generators there. Inspections will be on a per jurisdiction basis. Tier 1, Tier 2, inspections for food recovery organizations or services. And then here, you'll notice we have the words if applicable here, because this will not be required, as you'll see with the jurisdictions. This is within the regulations, but it's not a required reporting field. Complaints, same idea, number received, number investigated. You can provide an additional description if you like. All right. All right, so in the enforcement and monitoring section, we have the compliance reviews. We've organized it into the organics, and you'll see in a minute the recycling or mandatory commercial recycling. And so whether 1383 or more, we've combined it into this one grid, and that's kind of what you're seeing with these crazy blue arrows. This is what I was trying to kind of show you, that for more in particular, we've taken the identification to cover businesses and multifamily complexes section and the monitoring section, which looks like this, where you'd report kind of individually for jurisdictions if you were a regional agency, and moved it all over into one grid. I think one thing that's important to note here is that we've removed the separation of commercial businesses and multifamily and combine those into the definition of commercial businesses to line up with the definition within 1383. So you'll no longer have to split out between commercial businesses and multifamily. You just enter the number included in a compliance review here, and then included in a compliance review that are not recycling the organics here, which is what this blue arrow is kind of trying to show you. That moved over into there. The monitoring piece from more gets moved up into this grid here. Question 6 and question 7 from more, not quite down enough, are being removed because they were not required. So just to kind of help speed up reporting as much as we can, we're just going to remove those from program code 3035, the commercial organics recycling. So you won't see those in the program details anymore. Moving forward, you'll just enter your information into this grid here. Mandatory commercial recycling, we formatted the same way as the grid above, combining multifamily complexes and commercial businesses into one. Those not recycling. The monitoring piece moves up, which is a text field. You need to be able to type as much as you want to in there, an additional description field as well, if needed. And again here, question 6 and 7 from program code 2030 that was in the program details, we're going to remove since they were optional to be reported on anyway. Notices violations, splitting out between per jurisdiction between the residential organic waste generators, commercial organic waste generators, tier 1 and tier 2 edible food generators, the number of notices for food recovery organizations, food recovery services. And then here, this one in particular is more associated with the complaints reporting requirements, but it just made more sense since it was number of notices issued based on complaints to move it over into the notices of violation grid instead of with the complaints grid. Penalty orders has the same build as the notice of violations, and then as well as the enforcement actions resolved. We're almost there, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. Facilities is all SRI related, same idea. Check the programs if they still, if the program details are current and correct. You can click on the hyperlink if you need to update anything. AB 876 that currently lived under the Infrastructure and Barriers tab of mandatory commercial organics recycling is unfortunately still a regulatory reporting requirement. The 1383 capacity planning reporting does not override it. But one thing that we're able to do to simplify things, and what this is kind of trying to show you, is the big blue bar is showing you a snippet of what currently exists. What we're going to shift this section into to meet kind of the regulatory requirement is just ask you this question here. Per 876, has anything annually changed for the submittal of county capacity planning requirements as required in Article 11, Section 18992.1 et al. And so the way this will work is you just say yes if there is something you'd like to say, and you type it into this notes fields here. If there are no updates on an annual basis that's not captured within the 1383 capacity planning reporting, then you just say no, and then you don't have to go through the process of answering. I think there's 7 or 8 questions here. It's only showing you a snippet of the 3, but these questions here you'll no longer be required to answer. The 1383 enforceable mechanism is just your area to notify us if there's any ordinance or contact changes. And if there's any ordinance changes here, any contact changes down here for either your primary or official contact. We will add a document management button here, so you can just add or upload a copy of your ordinance here, and then you can just describe, like identify kind of where in that copy the changes occurred. The planning document section over on the right is shown in the red boxes, is showing you, and again, there's no changes here, we're just moving things, is showing you the sections as they apply to your jurisdiction that got moved into this section. So there's no changes to these questions, they're just all moved into one section now. And then our last slide here, this is where you're going to be able to add new programs for SRI specifically if you still need to. You'll be able to type additional information if you want, and then get to your document management. So there's no changes here, just putting it all in one spot. And with that, concludes the walkthrough of that. We'll open it up to the Q&A section.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Branch Chiefs Kara Morgan and Ashley Yee, for beginning to answer some of these questions in the chat pane. We'll go ahead and begin with some of those for those that don't have access to the chat pane for whatever reason. The first of which is, will the EAR Excel file that Andrew is walking through be posted on the CalRecycle website in the near future? We will not be posting the Excel file that Andrew is presenting, as this webinar will be recorded and posted. Feel free to also take screenshots during this too. Our next
so just,
from Stephanie.
sorry, just to add a little clarification, I will show you a new reporting webpage that we created and where some tools are available in just a moment here.
All right, our next question is from Stephanie Ewalt. Will the disposal modification be built into the EAR logic, or can it be? And the answer, nothing will change on how we have submitted disposal modifications in the past.
The next question is regarding red boxes that were visible in the beginning of the first slide that you were presenting, Andrew. They would like to know what they were and why it wasn't visible in some sections.
Not all the sections are a reorganization of the old EAR, and those red boxes were trying, well, there's 2 things, I guess, going on. The red boxes you could see were ones where I was trying to highlight where parts of the old EAR are moving to. And then the ones I was trying to draw, which apparently no one could see, were just ones where I was trying to highlight particular rows or columns.
Okay, next question is from Diane Friedman, town of Danville. Why do jurisdictions have two types of recycled content paper they have to account for? What are the differences between the two? Paper is copy paper and paper products are toilet paper, etc. See the definitions in the regulations.
Thank you. The next question is from Kelly Schoonmaker. This is a follow-up question for compost units. If 2 units are not possible, could it be changed so that cities are reporting in ROWP instead of cubic yards per tons of compost? It would simplify calculations for jurisdictions.
So the regulations require the compost to be reported in tons or cubic yards, not in ROWP.
And Kelly, if you would like further clarification, we're going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Thanks. I do actually. That question was sort of a follow-up. My first one was, could a city report, a city or county report procurement of compost in cubic yards and in tons? Because the issue is if you're getting it for landscape use, you're going to be buying it in cubic yards mainly. And if you have to supplement by subsidizing or buying compost for ag use, that's going to be purchased in tons. And you may not always have all the information to be able to convert it either to volume or to weight, depending.
That's a great question, Kelly. Kind of thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's something we'll bring to our developers and see if we can add some functionality there.
Our next question is from Christine Williamson. Will we need to fill out separate lines for the same hauler if they have both waived areas and non-waived areas?
I think if I'm understanding your question, no, because all the kind of the waiver functionality in these grids does is no longer make it required, but if it applies to parts and not parts, you would just not have to report on the numbers in the areas that are waived, just the areas that are not waived.
And Christine, you are unmuted in case you need, additional clarity on that.
Okay, yes. I am 13 haulers who will have census tracts that will be waived and census tracts that won't. So I guess my question was, is there a separate area or separate lines for waived versus non-waived areas?
There's not a separate line. Let me see if I can go back and show. I think maybe showing you something might be helpful. I'll go back to that and just answer your question. If you want to enter it that way, you'll be able to, and you can just put it in the name. So the way it'll kind of work, right? If you had here, there'll be a button you can add a hauler. So you could say hauler A waived and report on that, and then hauler A not waived and report on that. So you'll have the functionality to do so if you want to, but I think you could also
right, and that's actually I think where I was going with that question.
Okay.
Okay, next question. Alexander asks, will there be character limits for any of the text fields? And if so, could those be noted in the system?
No, I think we made most of the character limits quite large, except in numbers. I think we kept it to 10 billion. So hopefully that's large enough for you, but let me know if that's not, and we can make adjustments there.
Hey, Andrew, before we get to another question, I'd like Ashley to come on and talk about the August 1 year and October 1 year and just in general the timing, and then you can follow up with some clarity because we're getting a lot of questions on that, which I can appreciate. Go ahead, Ash.
Sure. So we were hoping to make this year's ears, because there's multiple ears that are due, a little more streamlined for the jurisdictions this year. So what Andrew just showed you is the combo ear going forward starting this year. So even though you guys did not start implementing 13A3 until this year, this actually is going to be that October 1st report that is due on October 1st, but it also combos what you guys are used to for the August 1st report. So I know that's a little confusing. So what does that mean? So for things that aren't 1383 related, like HHW is probably the easiest one, please report on what you did for 2021 in this year. For MCR and more, because we rolled that up with 1383, report on what you have most current. So what you are doing for the January to June 2022. So that, as a reminder, that October 1st year for 1383 was for January 2022 to June 30th, 2022. So you will be reporting on your first 6 months of implementation for 1383. And then I know due dates have been asked too. So what we are going to do is we are probably, as long as everything works out with IT, we're probably going to release this year beginning of June. So like we normally do for all the past years that you guys are used to, we'll have another webinar, like a step-by-step walkthrough that you're used to Chris Bria doing. So we'll have another one of those beginning of June once the year is actually available for you guys to open up. As you guys know, usually that year is due August 1st. If you would like, you may turn it in August 1st. However, we will be extending that, I guess we could say, until October 1st, when actually the 1383 year would have been due this year. So I hope that makes sense. So really this year technically will be open from the beginning of June till October 1st. But you can turn it in August 1st if you have all your data available. So I hope that helps. Kara, Andrew, please chime in if I missed anything.
Yeah, Ashley, thank you so much. And I hope that for all the jurisdictions, you find this helpful, that you won't have to do 2 separate reports. It'll all be included in one. As Ashley noted, you will have the ability of submitting anytime up until October 1. After that, we will consider it late and we'll be following up. So we hope that you'll find that helpful. And again, as Ashley said, we'll have another webinar like we normally do. We'll go back over all this. You'll actually be able to see the electronic annual report in its ear form rather than this Excel, and we think that'll be super helpful as well. But today we just wanted to show you some of these changes so that you can start thinking about it. But again, we'll have a more detailed webinar showing you what it actually looks like, how it actually functions, probably around that early June timeframe. Andrew, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think you two got it right. Thank you.
Oh, and then I'm seeing questions now come in on this. So Andrew will soon go over what's due on April 1st. So that's a different report. And we should release that probably within the next few weeks. And Andrew could correct me if I'm wrong. And then there still is capacity planning. So that has come up too. So Andrew, if you could cover that when you go into your next part of your presentation.
Okay. Any other questions on the restructuring before I move on?
Not that we've seen so far. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Ashley and Kara. Our next question comes from Amber Fizette. If you have a low population waiver for some areas, but not all, how do you show that difference?
So kind of, I guess in general, let me go back to the restructuring just to kind of explain how that will work.
And Andrew, as you explained, for those that have asked, we had a lot of folks ask the similar question. So Ray, we'll address it just this one time, and then if there's additional follow-ups, we can do that follow up with individual folks. So go ahead, Andrew.
Sure. So if you have applied for a waiver and it's been approved by the department, you'll have the functionality. I'm just kind of using this grid here as an example. Oops, can't highlight it. There we go. You'll have a functionality as you walk through the EAR where a low population waiver could apply, that you'll be able to check this box. And by checking that box, it's not going to require you to fill out that row anymore, but you can still fill out the row as it applies to the areas where the waiver does not apply. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can still have the option, or not the option, I guess you'll still have the ability to report where you need to report, but at the same time, you won't have to report all that. And I guess just as an additional thing, I would probably use this additional description box at the end, and that's where you can kind of explain, you know, this number doesn't include all our generators because we have a low population waiver in these areas. It accounts for this many generators, just as an example of something you could say to kind of provide some additional detail on that.
Okay, our next question has come in from the SLCP inbox. Just a reminder, if you guys don't have access to the chat, you can send emails to the SLCP inbox. And this question is from Marissa. In the edible food recovery section of the new EAR, it asks for a total number of food pantries in your jurisdiction. Does CalRecycle want all food pantries counted or just those that are participating in the SB 1383 portion of the EFR?
So I've kind of brought it here. I'm assuming you're talking about the food recovery organizations and services column, and that would be for the food recovery organizations and services located within your jurisdiction.
And I think one additional point of clarification, it's those food recovery organizations and services that are providing collection to commercial edible food generators. So you potentially could have a food recovery organization or service that doesn't serve a commercial edible food generator. So just keep that in mind. The regulations lay out what's required and what jurisdictions have to report on. And it's really all tied to servicing commercial edible food generators, but you can always do more than what's required in the regs.
And I think you briefly touched on this a little earlier, Andrew, but if you could just remind the audience here, when will the new EAR be available online?
Is that within Logic or the tool? I guess just a clarifying question.
I believe they in Logic, but if you have both estimates, that'd be great.
Sure. So I'll walk through where the tools are located on the website and where they'll be posted when they are available here in just a minute. And then as far as Logic, I believe if all goes as planned with IT and development of this, we'll be hoping to open this up in June, like Ashley stated, and we'll keep it open until October. So it'll capture both the August 1st reporting requirement for 939 MCR more, as well as the October 1383 report as well.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Our next question is from Deborah. Her question is the standard EAR still due on 8/1/2022 for all 2021 tonnage and activities?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. Is the standard EAR still due on August 1st, 2022 for all 2021 tonnage and activities?
Yes.
And Deborah, okay, thank you.
You have something you want to add, Ashley or Kara?
Yeah, so we keep seeing the clarifying questions come in. So yes, to confirm, the EAR that is due on October 1st, 2022, the new EAR that was in 1383 regs. This is the EAR that Andrew just showed, but it is a combo EAR for what would have been due this year for October 1st for last year's, programs. So again, like Kara stated, we're hoping that we made it a little bit easier for you guys so you're not, almost putting in duplicate information in 2 different years. So again, if this is a program that was not affected by 13A3, so HHW, I'm picking on them, HHW, in the year that Andrew just showed, you would put in what you did for HHW in 2021. If it's a program that was affected by 13A3 and we rolled up some of the older EAR questions into this new EAR format like MCR and more, specifically more, you would put in what you're currently doing from this year, from January 2022 to June 2022. So this year when we will review it, there'll be some info from 2021, but there's also going to be more current info for anything that's 13A3 related. I know there's some questions coming up about waivers and the 619 process also. There's also text boxes that are built into the EAR, and you'll see it when Andrew and Chris do their big showcase in June. So you can put in some things in your text boxes. For example, if you have a 619, right? And Andrew could go more into that too, of guidance of what we're looking for. So when we do go through the run through in June, there'll be even further guidance on what happens if you're approved for 619, what happens, for the waiver thing. Andrew will show how it works. But Andrew, do you want to address what we're planning on sharing for the 619 process?
Sure. Yes. So I guess two parts. Like to just reiterate what Ashley said, and once we're into the logic and see this Excel template in logic form, if there's any required field where your numbers are impacted by 619, like you're not collecting that or you don't know that or you've delayed that, you would just enter a 0 in those boxes because it is still going to be required and ask you for an entry. And then in that additional description box, you can say why there's a 0 being entered there to kind of get through the system, because it will still require an entry, and where numbers are required, you're going to have to put a number. You won't be able to put NA or not applicable or 619. I guess you could put 619, but please put 0 in the box just so it doesn't confuse our reviewers. And then in the April report, since it's going to be more of a PDF Word version, at least as far as a tool that we're providing that you can use if you like, I'll show you, once I actually show you that tool here in a moment, of how we'd like you to go about stating if you have 619 that applies to something we're asking, that you can provide that explanation of when something's going to occur.
Okay, thank you. Next question comes from Greg Reyes. And Greg, we've unmuted you on our end. If you'd like to unmute yourself, we're going to ask you to kind of clarify your question a little bit. Your question was, how does the system define the subcategory jurisdictions, i.e. jurisdictions 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., in the context of a county's report? So Greg,
sorry, I apologize if this is should be obvious. My department is going to be taking over the 1383 reporting. I just found that out this week. So a lot of the tabs on your document say jurisdiction name, and then they say data for jurisdiction 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm trying to understand, is that pre-populated data that's in the existing EAR, or is that data I'm going to have to put in? And I say that because I'm taking over a jurisdiction with, it's a 7,200 mile square foot county we have regions that have waivers and some that don't, and it's a wide geographical area, so I'm trying to understand some of these pieces better.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, can you clarify, because I can't remember your situation. Are you currently in a regional agency or JPA?
No.
Okay. All right.
Personally, no. I'm an environmental health department that happens to also manage the franchise agreement. So we generate some of, are going to end up with a lot of the data in hand, and we've been handed all the reporting aspects.
Got it.
So
Yeah, so Greg, what I'm going to do is ask that you follow up with your LAMD liaison, and let's get a meeting set up with you and Andrew, and we're going to walk through your unique situation because it's a little bit different than others who have JPAs and RAs, and we need to have a little bit more information about your situation because we're going to have to do some things on the back end for that as well.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from the SLCP inbox from David Goldstein of the City of Ventura. Can you please tell me when they list jurisdiction 1, 2, 3 on the reporting form? Are they saying we need to get the information from the cities, or were these references to our jurisdiction and a list of businesses or haulers in the jurisdiction? I apologize, that might have been County of Ventura rather than City of Ventura.
Got you. I guess maybe just kind of clarify that. Maybe it wasn't quite clear enough. So the way it will work once we're into the logic system is that whatever you have been reporting for, those jurisdiction names will be pre-populated. So in the case of a single jurisdiction as a city or an unincorporated county, you will just have one row in these grids to fill out information. Whereas if you are in a regional agency or have a JPA agreement, or you're reporting for, as an example, special collection districts, all of those jurisdiction names will be pre-populated in the grid, and then you'll just have to answer kind of based on the what's the word I'm looking for, kind of the relationships coming to mind, but like your agreements that you've made that you will be satisfying reporting requirements for each of those members of your JPA or regional agency. So hopefully that clarifies. And the build that I showed you was just with the intention of showing more how JPAs or regional agencies electronic annual report will look. But if you only have one jurisdiction you're reporting for, you only have one row. Hopefully that is clear.
Next question is from Caitlin Lels. Edible food recovery was also not mandated until this year. Can we put 0 and describe our efforts until reporting numbers in August of 2023 year? Also, are jurisdictions required to inspect food recovery organizations?
So I'll take that one on. So yeah, I completely appreciate, we had a similar question related to procurement, and you may not have that data until the end of the year. And so we appreciate that. So you could put in 0. It would be great if you could also add a note, explaining why you put in 0. We won't have our data compiled until the end of this, the calendar year, and a little note that you're implementing your program. To answer the other question, which isn't really directly related to the reporting, but yes, jurisdictions are required to conduct inspections of food recovery organizations and food recovery services that are serving commercial edible food generators and are located in your jurisdiction. So if you have any follow-up questions on the inspection requirements, please follow up with your local assistance liaison, and we can get a meeting set up with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Karen Iniguez. They ask, if we have questions while filling out the form, who is the best point of contact?
Your LAM liaison should be able to help you fill out that reporting requirement. And if they can't help you, they will contact me and I will help you out with that. I think we have time for just a few more questions at 10:15. I wanted to walk into the April 1st initial jurisdiction report, and then we'll have some time after that to answer additional questions as well.
Okay, next one, Giza Goulart. If commercial multifamily businesses are hauling green waste via a landscaping contractor and do not generate food scraps, where do those generators go in the report?
Is it for the landscapers in particular? Is that the question, just to clarify that?
And guys, Giza, you are self-muted, so you can unmute yourself to clarify your question. And I see you have 2 in a row as well.
Just to kind of clarify, were you asking about the landscapers in particular when you report that?
No, it's because For SB 1383, we have so many commercial businesses, right, that they don't generate food waste, but they do generate green waste. That's the question. So if the business are hauling green waste via landscaping contractor and they don't generate food waste, how we report them?
Yeah, Andrew, I'll start and then you can add. So it sounds to me that you have a situation where a business should be issued a de minimis waiver for green container service. If they don't have any green waste and they don't have food waste, then the jurisdiction should issue a de minimis waiver. And there's a section in the annual report where you'll report all of the waivers that you have issued to commercial businesses or residential, commercial for physical space waivers. So if you have any other follow-up questions on issuing waivers and what needs to happen, please go ahead and contact your local assistance liaison and we'll get a meeting set up with you. Did that help answer the question?
Not exactly, because I'm not talking about a business. Let's say a law firm, okay? They don't generate food waste, but they do generate green waste.
Then they're
right?
still, yes. So unless you have determined they should have a de minimis waiver, they will have what's called green container collection service. And so you would report them as one under your collection numbers. Is that still not, is that helping?
I don't think we are talking about this exactly my question. So I will contact my Mallory and be sure that we can address that in a better way.
Let's do a follow-up and we'll go through your particular situation. Thanks so much.
No problem.
All right, I think we have time for one more. And there'll be some time at the end again too.
Thank you. The next question then is from Jennifer Ott. In the container collection tab, are you looking for the number of generators per hauler or total number of commercial and residential generators, but not necessarily separated by hauler?
You'll have to enter on a per hauler basis, and then it will sum it up for you at the bottom of the grid. And we put that in there in the case that your haulers potentially have different collection systems.
And Jennifer, we went ahead and unmuted you if you wanted to provide further clarification or.
Hi, sorry, I was away from my desk for a quick second. So my question was, in this table, do we need to have a column for each of our haulers, or if all of the haulers have the 3-bin system, can we just consolidate the numbers and just enter that one number of generators?
As we have it built right now on a per hauler basis. So it'll all sum it up under the same jurisdiction. So they'll all be associated with that same jurisdiction if you had multiple jurisdictions, but on a per hauler basis.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna show you the April initial jurisdiction report tool that we developed, and then there should be some time because that won't be much quicker in this first walkthrough to answer some additional questions. All right, so we'll start here first. And the web page screen is showing up, I'm assuming, right? Okay, so on the CalRecycle homepage, if you scroll down to the bottom, under Updates, New SB 1383 Resources, or the Learn More, they go to the same spot. Click on that, and then scroll down. We added a reporting section. Under the reporting section, it has a brief description of the reporting requirements. And if you scroll down to the bottom, we have the tools. So the initial jurisdiction compliance reporting tool, which is what I'm going to show you here in just a second. And then the restructured EAR jurisdiction tool, which is pretty much a version of that Excel spreadsheet that I just showed you, minus the kind of clips from the old EARs, because you don't need it as a tool. So that was just more for demonstration purposes. So if you click on this link, I already have it open, so I'm not going to click on it. Did that show up? Here, we'll go this way. Okay. So we developed the initial jurisdiction compliance report tool. This is an optional tool to use, but we put it here for your convenience. So the initial jurisdiction report, which is due April 1st of 2022, sorry, I'm just trying to find my notes real fast, has a reporting requirements outlined in section 18994.1. And it's fairly straightforward. You enter who is completing the report, the jurisdiction that you're completing it for, the primary contact person. If the person's different than the primary, the agent you've designated by the jurisdiction for receipt of service of official for the purposes of enforcement. I know that's a mouthful. Your official contact, we like to refer to them as. Provide a copy of the ordinances or other enforceable mechanisms that will be used to enforce the regulations within the jurisdiction. Some examples of this would be your collection ordinance, edible food ordinance, Imwello, cow green, and mulch if you're using mulch, and potentially even a procurement ordinance if you happen to have a procurement ordinance, just as some of the examples there. The collection system is modeled very similar to the Excel spreadsheet that I showed you. So we have it split between commercial and residential. And the same kind of idea is you check the box and enter the number here. As far as the 619, to kind of come back with that, if this applies to your collection container system and you're not yet collecting food or food soil paper, you select the current container system you have. And then you can also click select other, and then just kind of describe down here that you have a 619. You can put in the dates that you put in your that NOINC process of when you plan to be collecting that food and food soil paper. So that's same for commercial and residential. And then the last question would just be the high diversion organics processing facilities if you're using those. Sorry, not the last one. Allowed materials in green containers and collection facilities, which is the same format that I previously showed you. And then the Article 17 questions if those happen to apply. And I think just to maybe address a few more things before we go into questions specific to this or any other questions. The capacity planning report will be built into Logic, and Chris and I will be having webinars in the future to kind of do a walkthrough of that and what that looks like well ahead of the due date. And that should be open by the beginning of July. And so you're reporting that Logic system for that. And yeah, I mean, that's due August 1st of 2022 for the capacity planning report. Oh, and then for the April 1st report, we ask that you submit whatever version that you have submitted, whether you use our copy or your own version, to the slcp.organics email address. So slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. And then if you could just put in the subject line, initial jurisdiction report, that'll help us identify those easier so they don't get lost with just regular questions. And with that, I know this is a fairly simple and short one. I'll open it back up to more questions.
Thank you, Andrew. We have a couple questions regarding when and where this will be posted. So we'd like to note that recordings will be made when we ensure ADA compliance. A SLCP listserv message will go out with the location and link. So please be sure to subscribe to that listserv message. Our first question comes from Wallace Lowe, who does not have a microphone. So I will go ahead and ask it. So forgive me if it's not clear. Will there be a tool that can send out, will there be a tool that I can send out to all the jurisdictions in a regional agency to capture all the info required to be reported?
I guess yes, to answer your question, that would be the tools that I showed you that you can use optionally on the reporting webpage for either the April report or the upcoming restructured EAR report. You can also develop your own if you like, modeled after ours, or just your own format as well.
The next questions are from Colleen Foster. She has two. What are the requirements around designated person? And second, why are you asking about whether compostable plastics are allowed? Is that required now?
And Colleen, just to let you know, you are unmuted because I see that you have another question you'd like to ask out live.
Great. If you can help with those first two questions, I just want to make sure the designated person aspect, there's nothing different. You know, SB 1383 doesn't have any new requirements on that to what we've done in the past.
Are you talking about the April report here?
It was very legalese compared to what used to be.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, typically your primary person would be the person directly filling out the electronic annual report, and your very wordy, I'm just going to call it official contact, would be kind of your mayor if we ever took enforcement action, if we'd send an official letter to that we're doing a compliance review, as an example.
Okay, or city manager, right? We don't generally put it as our mayor, correct?
Correct.
Great. And then the compostable plastics, I was kind of confused by that. I think it's interesting, but we don't require the diversion of compostable plastics, right? So what's the intent there?
Correct. It's just one of the 1383 regulatory reporting requirement questions of whether you accept them or not. Where is it down here? Yeah, are they allowed to be placed in the green container is the question in particular. So just yes or no. And that's just because.
But then if you say yes, the next one is the notice that it accepted. So if you have a franchise agreement, would that be the notice that we would provide? Or I guess.
Yeah, it could be. The regs. Yeah, the regs are pretty flexible. But it really, what the intention is, and this is laid out in Article 3 of the regulations, if compostable plastics are allowed in the green container, there does have to be an annual notice from the processing facility that they can process that material. So, I'm not really sure about your franchise agreement, what's included in there, but that it's laid out. So we could, we're happy to do a follow-up if you need more clarity on that, but this is specified in that section of the regulations.
Okay, it just might be helpful. I mean, we're not taking compostable plastics, so I don't think we are going to, but it'd be helpful to understand what that notice looks like so that the cities can clearly tell the haulers that we expect you to provide this notice on an annual basis. And
the regulation
the bags, because you're kind of same thing on plastic bags, because we do plastic bag removal for commercial.
Yeah, so same thing with, there's a separate requirement if plastic bags are allowed in the green container, then there is an annual notification the city should get from the facility that they can actually, handle those, open those plastic bags, et cetera. There is no specificity as far as what that annual notice is from the facility. It could be an email, it could be a letter, but the reason we put it in is we wanted to ensure that it's the facility, the processing facility, that's deciding if they can handle plastic bags in the green container or if they can handle compostable plastic. So very straightforward, whatever that notice is that you want to work out with your processing facility. And that could be done through the hauler as well. I hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And lastly, Kara, or Andrew, my last question. So early on in this form, there is a section, the 3 bins, or if you're going to do an NOIC, you write where the date for the NOIC and when you expect to comply. But then you go to the bottom of the document, and you're scrolling kind of quick, where you're asking us to certify that at least 90% of the commercial and 90% of residential are enrolled in a collection service. And there's just a yes or no. So if you're an NOIC and you're not doing one or both of those, if I say, if I'm doing commercial, I'd say yes for commercial, but I'm not doing residential, but they're kind of mixed together.
Yeah, the last 2 questions there at the bottom are in particular for Article 17 for performance-based source separation organic waste collection service.
So that's only for those jurisdictions that have identified that they are going to go the performance-based route. We don't know many, if any, jurisdictions that are going to do that. So you would not fill in that section if you were not doing performance-based collection service.
And that kind of goes to another question my staff had on the October report, you know, like, and I saw there's a lot of questions on food recovery, a lot of very specific questions. If there are certain elements of SB 1383 that we're not going to be doing, and we've done the NOIC process, how do we explain that in that October report?
Sure, and we've answered this a few times in the chat as well, so I'll go ahead and verbally do it as well. So what we'd like you to do is if you to report on what's currently happening. So one example is if you are a jurisdiction and in your notification or NOIC, put in that you're going to be implementing residential food and food soil paper collection. You currently have a 3-container system, but you don't yet allow food and food soil paper to be collected. Then in that report that's due by October 1, you would still report the total number of, say, residential customers that have 3-container service, but we would like you to add a note that you currently are not providing food and food soil paper. We have all the details of a jurisdiction's notification. So our team, when we're reviewing the annual report, we'll be looking at, you know, what your NOIC, your notification programs and timelines are as that relates to what you reported in the annual report. If, for example, you don't have, say, a green container collection service at all for commercial businesses, then you would put 0 and then just add a note that this is something that, you know, is in our notification. Does that help clarify?
I think so, Kara, it does. But I know when we spoke recently about the NOIC, it was important to keep it pretty simple and straightforward. So we didn't get into very detailed explanations of exact dates and timelines. Yeah. So I think we'd still go that route in this October report.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, you know, if we have questions, we're going to follow up with the jurisdiction. So please know. And then as you're filling out the annual report and these questions are coming up, feel free to contact your LAMD liaison. We'll set up a call with you and we'll go through it. Thanks for the questions.
Yes, thank you. That's a good segue into the next couple of questions regarding SB 619 and the notice of intent to comply. Christine Williamson is asking if part of our jurisdiction is compliant, but another is under NOIC. On number 5, do we select both the relevant collection systems and other?
Let's see, we'll go up to number 5. So yes, I believe if I'm understanding your question correctly, select what you currently are doing for a collection system, and then also select other, and you can explain the 619 or NOIC, whatever you kind of submitted in that information. You can put that same explanation in that field as well. Do you want to add anything, Kara?
Yeah, you know, again, you know, for a jurisdiction that has one part of its, so let's say we're a city, and one part of the city has 3+ containers, and another part of the city does not currently have that collection service. You know, feel free to contact us when you're getting ready to fill this out, and we can talk about your particular situation and how to complete that. That's a little bit of an unusual situation, so we can work on that. But you could always, as Andrew said, use that other field and explain your particular situation. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it is, because again, it's for an unincorporated kern. And so, you know, I mean, like that other jurisdiction, we have over 7,000 square miles.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have part of our unincorporated pockets near our Metro Bakersfield area where we coordinated already years ago a 3-cart container, you know, collection system. Right. So part of our jurisdiction is already under compliance, but not fully, you know, so that was kind of where I was going with that, you know.
Yeah, that's a great one. So, you know, you could have, like in your county, you could have 3-container collection. What we'd like you to do is for those, say residents or businesses that have that, put in the number that have that service, right? And if another part of the county, they have a different, situation, put in the number of generators that have that. When it comes to the number of generators that self-haul, you're not reporting on that information. So just keep that in mind, because you have that situation in Kern as well.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question from Kelly Shoemaker. Clarification on my earlier capacity question. When will the necessary data from Department of Finance and RDRS be available so that we can use the calculator? Also, would you mind putting in the chat the due date? I thought I just heard from Andrew say early August 1st.
Yeah, so I think, Chris, I might ask you to answer the specific DOF questions, but the same time that they usually release, I believe it's May-ish. And then for the capacity planning report question, August 1st of 2022. Chris, did you want to add anything to that?
And then I think Dan and Cameron are around too to answer the RDRS.
Yeah, so we get the population and employment data usually in the spring, sometime around April, May-ish, and by the time we have it rolled up, it's usually late May, early June. So probably around the time the year would be available, June 15th, if we're sticking with the previous dates. That is around the time that the calculator should probably be updated. Might be a couple days ahead of that, but that's kind of the schedule on that. And the data that will load into the organics capacity calculator will be the 2021 data, which will be the most current at that time. Anything else? No? Okay. Andrew, back to you.
I think there was a follow-up RDRS question. If Dan or Cameron, if you could answer that one.
Hello, this is Cameron. Can you repeat the question regarding the RDRS portion?
Yes, yeah. When will the necessary data from DOF and RDRS be available so that we can use the calculator?
Well, the RDRS data, as far as what is entered into the system, can always, it's in real time, and it's always available through our quarterly, through our public reports. So at the time of filling out the required forms, you can guide to those public reports, and the data that has been entered into RDRS, again, is real time and is available for access. I hope that answers the question. Let me know if I want to clarify any more.
And I can add a clarification to that. As Cameron mentioned, the RDRS data is always available through the public web reports on the RDRS website. But I think maybe the linchpin here is, when is the fourth quarter facility data need to be turned in, and when was that most likely to be finalized? Because what will load into the calculator will kind of be like whatever day we work that out with IT, like start doing it on June 1st. But is necessarily that fourth quarter RDRS data ready by that time?
It'll be ready on June 1st, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it'll actually be released May 1st because it's real time, but it's actually delayed 1 month after the end of the reporting for that quarter to give us some time to do some QA/QC. So May 1st is when the public reports will have the full year 2021 data, and then it'll be going into the year, probably June.
Yeah, and along those lines, the Department of Finance data, the population data that would also load into the calculator, they usually do a release on that late April, early May, and then we have to do some roll up on it. So yeah, I guess ideally we would have it in that calculator by late May, early June, and the capacity report would be due August 1st. So there hopefully is plenty of time in there. We know that as counties, you have to gather this data from the individual jurisdictions, but you can always be making adjustments or put in your own data currently into that calculator. You can type in whatever tonnage number you want, and we understand RDRS could change. Whatever number that flows into that on June 1st might not be the exact same number on June 15th, but I think most jurisdictions have a pretty good handle on what the ballpark of their disposal should be. So you're not completely, incapable of using that calculator right now. It's just not having anything feed in quite yet.
Kelly, I have you unmuted. Does that answer your question? However, you are self-muted.
I am now not self-muted. That did answer my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you all. The next question comes from Laurentine Brazil. Does this requirement also include the ASTM D6400 BPI compostable bags? Is this material lumped together in number 3? And to add to that, David Briggs asked if the requirement is to report whether plastic bags are accepted and removed during organics processing. Did this refer to hydrocarbon-based plastic bags and certified compostable bags?
So I'm not familiar with the specifics of the requirements, but I believe whatever the regulations say is what is considered a compostable plastic bag based on the regulations is what it's talking about. And then to the second question, I believe the question is only, and I think just to kind of come down to it, it's just if they're allowed to be placed in the bags, not necessarily whether it's removed or not, which I assume it is, but that's the question.
Laurentine, you're unmuted on our end. Would you like to add any follow-up to that, or did it answer your question?
So if we allow the ASTM D6400 compostable bags, then this number 3, we check yes.
I would, yes, because it's allowed to be placed in the plastic bags, and then you'd identify the facility that is accepting those or processing those.
And then we add detail to say that it's a certified compostable bag and not a regular plastic bag.
You could add that additional detail, yes, if you want to.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And it might even, just to kind of clarify a little bit more, lead into that first question of the compostable plastics allowed into the green container. Might be the more appropriate spot to talk about your compostable.
Yeah, for us, we only do the bags. We don't do the containers. So we're not doing the bioplastics. No plastics, no bioplastics. But if you want to use a compostable bag, only the ASTM D6400 ones.
Yeah, the first question is just asking though about compostable plastics being put into the container. So that would include film plastics as well as containerized carton type plastics.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so technically you're kind of filling out both the compostable plastics that are allowed in the green container as well as bags that are allowed in the green container. And then to our 1383 team, if we have someone that's unmuted, can you go ahead and mute them, please? Thank you.
All right, next question from Sharon Mitchell. It's a follow-up question on special districts. If special districts with solid waste authority will be added into the EAR system, would that mean that they will begin to enter their own 2021 EAR information not related to SB 1383 and then annually thereafter as well?
No, so there's no reporting requirements for special collection districts for AB 939 MCR or more. It's only 1383, and your report in the system does not have the sections like the SHRI sections as an example within your electronic end report. So there won't be any confusion when you go into your report of what is non-1383 questions. It'll only be 1383 questions.
Hey, Andrew, on that point, and I'm not sure what we did, but if a special district that provides solid waste collection services is a part of a JPA, and other members of the JPA, right, are reporting on SHRI and WHE, how will that look in the annual report, or can you answer that yet?
Yeah, sure. So as far as kind of that JPA or regional agencies, since some of the jurisdictions have SHRI programs or MCR programs or more programs, all those sections will still be in there. But most of the 1383 questions are built into the grid format. So the special collection districts will populate in there, and then where it's kind of the SHRI or MCR, all of the jurisdictions are, so in like MCR as an example, if it's not 1383 related, you can just put zeros for that special collection district because it wouldn't apply to you. And then in the SHRI area, they're not on a per jurisdiction basis. It's just for the regional agency as a whole. So you kind of be covered by default in those areas as well.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And
so
then,
go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to add since you brought it up as well is kind of based on limitations of our system, I'm not sure what kind of agreements you have with your regional agencies and reporting is concerned. So if your JPA or regional agency point of contact is not kind of given the authority or doing the reporting for you, there's no way for us to have kind of a separate login into that report. So if as a special collection district, you want to go in and fill out your own information, you can, but you'll also have the ability to change anything else in that report. We're not going to be able to have any functionality to isolate it just down to you. So just a word of caution that if you have multiple people going in and filling out reports, you will be able to do that, but you can also change anything in there. So just be very careful when you're in there if you have multiple reporters.
Great tip. Thanks, Andrew. And we'll remind folks of that tip again when we do the webinar later.
Sherry Metz asks, on the report due April 1st, where would multifamilies be reported, residential or commercial?
So just per the definition, multifamily with 5+ is commercial and anything under that is residential, generally speaking.
Sherry, if you'd like to follow up, you are unmuted on our end. We'll go to the next question.
Okay, next question from Allison Burley. Regarding the initial compliance report, did I understand Kara Morgan's statement correctly that the number of generators at Self Hall should not be reported in the other line items?
I mean, there's no specific area for Self Haul to be reported in here because the question is more focused on the collection system that you have. So they wouldn't really have a container system for self haulers.
Yeah, and
anything, Kara?
yeah, I do. I just the regulations do not require reporting on the number of self haulers, so that's not a requirement, so you don't have to do that. Hope that answered your question, Allison.
We have a number of questions coming in for some clarity on the calendar of all the reports due. So Colleen Foster specifically has asked if we can get a calendar of all the reports due, the ERA, SB 1383 payment programs, etc.
And I'd like to add to that because I was actually just playing around with the website, which is the SB 1383 tools are really good. But it's funny when you go to the home page, if you don't know to scroll way down. Actually, before this call, I was on a website redesign call for the whole city, and you got to scroll way down. Then you get to jurisdictions. You got to think of yourself as a jurisdiction. You go to jurisdiction, then you scroll way down, then you find the reporting box, and you go there, and you get to SB 1383. But if you go to the home page and you just start at jurisdictions, or you start at local coordinators, which I've been doing for the past decade, you have a 20 different tabs, and one of them is annual report, and then it takes you to a page that just talks about EAR, and there's no cross connection. So if I was just a new staffer, didn't really know what to do, or underfunded staffer, I'd be really confused. So it'd be kind of nice to get a calendar that, you know, the SRI is due this time, this is who needs to do a SRI, or the SRI is now incorporated in SB 1383. RDS is this, and this is what needs to happen. This is what it's going to cover. And then even, you know, having that calendar reference grants and payment programs, the different dates for those. I've got a text group going on right now, and everybody's asking questions, and we're all pretty confused. Sorry, thank you. You guys are doing a great job, and you're trying, just trying to give feedback. to make it work.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've seen some of the other comments. I think for sure, and I don't think we thought about Andrew cross-connecting to our other EAR web pages yet. We haven't gotten to that. So we'll make that a priority so that everything is connected. And we'll try and I don't think it's gonna be possible to connect a big calendar with the grant programs, et cetera. But certainly for the reporting, I think we'll take this input and look at our reporting webpage, see if we can make that a little bit more clear for folks on what's due when, and then we'll update that each year. So we'll give some thought to it. I don't know what our answers yet with our limitations on our what we can do on a web page, but we will take all of this into consideration.
Thank you, and you're not alone. We just tore apart our city's webpage and had the same issues, so thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much to all of you for sharing that input on the calendars, and because I really appreciate everyone just wants to be clear, right? So you can know what your due dates are, what you need to submit, and so that you can meet what's needed. So we really appreciate that, and we'll do our best to provide clarity to all of you.
Next question is from George Luna. For commercial waivers, CalRecycle has mentioned they expect the number of waivers to decrease over the years, and that if too many waivers are granted by a jurisdiction, that CalRecycle will conduct a compliance evaluation. How is a jurisdiction expected to address space constraints in densely populated areas? Can we please get clarification as to how many is too many waivers? Is it percentage, or is it a number that applies to any jurisdiction?
So thank you for that question. It's really not related to today's webinar. So what we will do is the local assistance liaison will follow up with you and we'll set up a conversation to answer your specific questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you. The next question comes from Neil Shapiro. They asked, on April 1st, is that number supposed to be the smaller, sorry, again, on April 1st number, so this smaller number is generators as of December 31st, 2021. Neil, we're gonna go ahead and unmute you so that you can follow up and make sure that we've answered that.
Hi, this is Neil from City Santa Monica. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, because I'm calling from Israel, so that's exciting. Yeah, I'm just confused. The April 1st report, that number of generators, so is that as of December 31st? Because the year and the October deadlines includes numbers from January to June 30th, 2022. Obviously, we can't report those numbers in April, so it's confusing what numbers you want, at least to me.
I would say your most current number of generators receiving that service.
Okay, so we run a report just before April 1st. That's all you really need.
Yes.
Right, and then we would just rerun it again for the January through June. Go.
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, yeah, right before kind of each of those reports are due would probably be the most accurate information from your end to be reporting.
Okay, thanks. So you just want to get a sense of where we are in April and then see how that compares to later in the year.
Yeah, the 2022 is, there's a few different check-ins. Starting in August of 2023, it'll just become an annual basis, but these first initial regulatory requirements make you do it a few times.
Great, thank you all very much.
Christine Williamson asked about capacity.
Jill, one second before you go there. I did want to note, Andrew's done a great job of putting up these tools that he's sharing today up on the reporting webpage. And we did put that in the chat as well. So you can, Andrew, can you tell us, you've got this April 1 Word doc up. We have the Excel also up on the reporting page.
Yeah, so do you want the address? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, let's just show folks, because we've had a lot of folks been like, I want to look at this again, right? And you can do that if you would like.
Yeah, thank you for that. Oops, I just messed. Let me start that again. There we go.
Andrew, maybe show them where to go starting from our homepage, like
Oh,
CalRecycle
okay.
page, and how to get there.
Sure. All right, so we'll just start over. So on this page, this is our homepage. You can also do a search if you want, but if you just want to do it in a clicking way, so you could probably do SLC reporting and it'll show up if you do a search, but in a clicking fashion, you scroll down to the bottom of the homepage under Updates, New SB 1383 Resources, which leads you to the SLCP main page. And then if you go down kind of this tiles area where we have other resources, at the very bottom, since it's the newest, there's reporting. And I guess just to highlight too, if you came down here to just jurisdictions, it leads to the same spot. Like the reporting here under jurisdictions is the same one here. It's not going to a different spot. So click reporting. And then it gives you the reporting requirements. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of that, under CalRecycle reporting resources, the first two are what we're talking about today. And then we added some links to already existing tools just to hopefully make it a little more convenient to put all 1383 things in one spot for you. So these are the first two we're talking about today. Initial jurisdiction compliance reporting tool being the Word document, and the restructured EAR jurisdiction tool being the Excel spreadsheet, which mirrors the logic system very, very closely.
Okay, next question, Christine Williamson. Capacity information is due August 1st. Will there be a separate report for that, or am I getting ahead of things and it just hasn't been discussed yet?
We mentioned it. We didn't show you anything about it. It will be separate. It will be in the logic system. It won't be related to what we showed you today. It'll be its own thing, and we will have webinars upcoming doing walkthroughs of what that looks like within the logic system, and that is due August 1st of 2022.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have time for another question?
Yeah, we can do a couple more. We have 5 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. The next question is from Lisa McCullough. So if a private gated community of 700 homes is a part of a CSD, would they report directly to CalRecycle?
I guess my answer would be it depends. If the CSD is going to report on its own, then the CSD, Community Service District, for those for CSD acronym, will report on its own for the collection system and its number of generators. If there's some sort, and I guess maybe an added nuance too, that we're adding functionality too, that if like a city or county has an agreement with the CSD to do reporting for them, we're adding functionality that CSDs can be added to them as well. It doesn't have to be classified just as a regional agency within our system. So if you have that agreement in place, then whoever has that agreement to do the reporting for them, that CSD will populate in their electronic annual report, and there'll be a row in each of those grids to report on just the CSD activities.
Lisa, we hope that answered your question, but you are unmuted on our end if you would like to follow up.
Okay, moving on. Jennifer Ott asked will there be a copy of a chat after the webinar?
We will have a recording available as soon as it's made ADA compliant, and we'll send out a listserv message as soon as that's available and where it is.
Okay, I think she's wanting to see the questions and answers that are answered in the chat here, so that will not be available for viewing after.
That I'm not sure about. Can someone else speak on that?
Sure, I can do it. So like Andrew said, the recording will be available. If we were to send out the chat, we would also have to make that ADA compliant. So it's highly unlikely we'll be able to get that done. But if you do have any questions that were answered and you can't find it in the recording, feel free to contact your LAM liaison and they'll be able to answer these questions like us. If they need to, they could also ping Andrew, like he said earlier today. So again, everything we send out does need to be ADA compliant. So for this chat function, it's a little more difficult, but again, the recording will be out hopefully in a timely manner. We just have to make everything ADA compliant.
All right, I think we have time for one more.
Okay, we have another question from David Briggs. When we report number of residential or commercial receiving service, shall we include the number of accounts the service provider has offered service to, the number they've delivered all 3 containers to, or the number that are actively participating in 3-bin service?
They believe I'm just going to go back real quick to the question. So it'd be the type of organic waste collection services provided for residential collection. So everyone, because it is required that everyone has service for organic, so everyone should, all your generators should have some sort of collection container for those organics.
And David, you're unmuted on our end if you would like to follow up really quickly.
Yeah, thanks. I would. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that's the phrase that's a bit unclear, the provided service. Let me offer this. If we have a customer, residential or commercial, who refuses to take, for instance, a green bin, have we provided the service or haven't we?
You have not. So you're reporting on the generators that have service.
Okay. So they have so they do have all 3 containers, and they're participating in the program, in the service, right? That's the magic number, or is it everyone we've provided containers to, even if they don't use all 3 of them?
Maybe that's a nuance, but whether or not someone puts out their curbside container that week, we're not looking at participation rates. We're looking at the number of generators that you have provided that service to. So whether or not they put it out that week or any weeks, it's the fact that they have that service. Does that help, Dave?
Yes. Okay. So really, participation is not the measure. It's
right.
How many? Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
That is a nuance, and that helps a lot.
Thanks.
Okay, it is 11 o'clock, so I'm just going to put up one last time. I believe it's here. If you still have questions we didn't get to, I'll just start with subscribe to our listserv. That's where we make announcements, in particular for the upcoming webinars of the actual logic system for both the October report as well as kind of the combined August report, and in addition to the capacity planning report. If you want to find those tools, the web address is on the screen. And then if you have any questions, send them to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov, and they will get forwarded to the appropriate people to answer your questions for you. Thank you for attending. Have a great day.